Hello, my dear friend, and welcome to the Spiritually Engineered Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the human experience from a spiritual perspective. Come on in, and I invite you to stay. All right, so today's special episode, I'm doing a special recording, a special segment where I'm going to talk about and regroup my experience around this Tantra course by a teacher named Guy Shahar. And there was something that was in my radar to do a while that I've been procrastinating and just putting off until now. I just decided to take the course now after using one of my apps to just plan it, schedule it, time it. Here's what I'm gonna do, when I'm gonna do it, and then sticking with it. And so now having to been a couple days, a couple modules into the course, I figured it'd be a good opportunity for me to put together, or at least to regroup what I'm putting together for myself from taking this course. Now, I'm no stranger to Tantra, and I remember when I first heard about the concept of Tantra, it was back in college. I think I remember, but it was like linked exclusively to like sexuality. That's the thing. And I remember it was like a post that my friend had shared with me about a guy doing a tantric orgasm. I have like a somewhat of a recollection of it, remember bits and pieces, and I thought it was pretty funny. It was hilarious. Hilarious at the time because I didn't know any better, especially being in my late teens, early 20s, or being college age. Of course, I didn't know any better. But now I'm at a place where I understand more. I've matured more. I've learned more about Tantra and why it's important. I think when I think about Tantra, I mean, there is a component that it is linked to sexuality. And in fact, because of my deep dive and curiosity into exploring Tantra, helped me to realize that when it comes to sexuality, it's closely linked to spirituality. But growing up Catholic, being raised, from a religious background, it's almost like, I mean, they mention and they talk about sex in a specific situation, at least what I've been taught growing up, that it's only in a certain context and it's good and pure. Outside, it's sinful, or how I was taught to look at it was dirty, to judge it, right? There's like sex only in certain scenarios is pure. Outside of it is just hedonistic, barbaric, all those things. At least this is the concepts that I picked up, right? I'm speaking for myself here. You might relate or you may not relate. And so going back to Tantra, helping me to recognize, to see how everything's integrated, helping me to deepen and unfold my understanding of oneness. And that really kind of distills it down to its essence, what that's about. So in this case, how is Tantra, how is sexuality connected to spirituality, and that there is no separation between the two? I've heard it sexual life force energy, like those combinations of words that to just mean like energy. It's almost like just looking at energy from a different layer. That's what I come to find when it looking at different practices, when it helps me to come back to just understanding the dynamics and layers, the multi layers of energy, the multi dimensions of energy. It really just it makes sense. Then I know it's like, okay, there's at least what I'm the person I'm learning from and what they're teaching, it's making sense. They're talking about something legit. And so now, and I've definitely done some courses and done some classes and whatnot, and I've connected with like-minded people, and it's definitely been very healing and eye-opening for me, for sure. Especially because I've had some teachers share some experiences where I thought I was alone in, and I judged myself for it. But then having to hear this person talk about it really helped me feel more free inside because of that. I won't go too much into details here. I don't want to talk about it here. Maybe some other time. That's just one of what I've been getting out of it. So tantra to me is something that's it's very all encompassing. It's not like, oh, I do tantra like, oh, I go to church on Sundays and then outside of that, it's whatever. No, it's like, even like when I say relations with God, it's always ongoing, right? Thinking about it from that perspective, now looking at tantra, it's everywhere. When it comes to being spiritual, it's everywhere. It's not like I'm spiritual. I can only be spiritual in a certain context. If I try to box that, I am missing the point. And when it comes to spirituality, spirituality is all encompassing. the spiritual in everything. You can extract the spiritual out of anything because of the fact that this planet is a school and we're all here to learn and grow as a soul. Commonality of all humanity, of all souls. Tantra. Let's get back to that. What I've learned about, at least now in this course, this teacher, Guy, he kind of breaks it down so that when it comes to Tantra, it's like it really is a big umbrella. Much like when I look at spirituality. Spirituality is a big umbrella, religion is underneath that umbrella, right? It's not the opposite, it's not the reverse. The way of putting that is like religion is spirituality, spirituality is not religion, at least exclusively. And this is what I've put together so far from someone who's been raised Catholic, who is identified as Catholic, but now at this point, I'm just spiritual. I don't align myself with a particular religion at this point in time because I think each one, there are bits and pieces of truth in each one, but not one is the authority or the authority over me or anyone of what's what, of understanding the essence of life, the different interpretations. And because of that, I will never align myself with any particular religion. I'm all about universality. What's universal? And if you care about that, you're speaking my language. If you talk that, you're speaking my language. So what I learned about Tantra is that there are three main components, despite the fact that there's many types of Tantra. Of course, the sexual component to it, but there's different types, different kinds and practices. But what I've learned from the course so far, there are three, like underlying within all the tantric practices. Number one, presence. Number two, energy. Number three, polarity. And one thing I'll add to before I go in depth, when it comes to the practices, tantric practices, there are many practices there's some that are solo exclusively, and then there's some that are exclusively partnered. And then I'm sure there's some practices that implements both. So I thought that was very interesting to understand more about the tantric arts, because what I've learned about tantra is at least tantra has been around for thousands of years, and it's just amazing how through our intuitive sense we're able to pick up and channel a lot of important things that even like the sciences today are starting to like now just discover. And that's actually going into the breathwork component aspect to it, but I won't get to that quite yet. Let me dive into like presence first. With presence, what's interesting when he talked about Tantra, at least the main principle that it teaches, is regarding presence, where I place my attention, which makes sense. And he mentioned the example of like if I'm breathing, if he was doing a mimicry exercise where he was like asking us to mimic his hand motions. And then he asks us, did you pay attention or did you know what you felt? Do you know what you were feeling in your left pinky toe? Everyone, if not most of us, were like, no, right? Because our attention was the instructor's hands at that time. And so that's what an example that he gave regarding to teach, to explain about presence and what that's about. So it's like where my presence is where am I placing my attention? Which makes sense to me. It makes sense. It connects the dots. Now imagine if you're going out to dinner with a friend and they're on their phone while you're both eating, and that person obviously is not showing, or at least per definition, they're not showing presence. Their attention is placed on the device more so than you, right? So just relaying that information and just again, just this is for me just to put things together for myself, in all this. And he took it further when he says like where tantra comes in is like where the practices, what they're geared towards is like helping me to have an awareness of where my attention goes, but then move towards having a sense of agency or control of where I place my attention. Because nowadays with technology, it's so easy. So many things can hijack our attention. I know so many things can hijack my attention, and a lot of things do hijack my attention. And as far as where I am with my own sense of agency with that, there's lots of room for improvement. I'll tell you that much. The second component is energy. And he talked about using the analogy of this device where if you touch it on both ends like a little pole and it's like it lights up and makes a sound when you hold it a certain way. When you hold these like aluminum these aluminum covered ends of the device, when he touched it on both sides, it started to make a noise and light up. And so he talks about the analogy of talking about energy of like circuits. It's like completing a circuit. And so, and I can complete the circuit by myself, or at least he demonstrated by himself. But then if I were to involve another person, we can complete the circuit that way. And so he talks a lot a bit about, with Tantra is like really completing that circuit, meaning that and that relating either with myself or other people. And to add on to that, Tantra is about having an awareness of the flow of energy. Where is it going? So that's kind of what, again, the other component, what Tantra is geared towards in this practice and this key concept here. And then to get to a point, the goal would be to be able to consciously direct that energy. And I remember he mentioned the example that if take in the bedroom can create an environment where both parties can experience, or multiple parties really, can experience deeper sense of pleasures, activating their senses and really feeling into it everything. That ultra presence and feeling everything about it. So like really taking that whole naked that up a notch from an energetic perspective. And I remember he mentioned the example of like, Einstein and why energy is important because usually when it comes to energy, a lot of people have this idea that it's something woo woo, like, oh, energy. Even though we talk energy from the sense of like electrical energy and other aspects, but if we talk about energy as a whole, people can feel some type of way. But he brought up Einstein because he said that from a quote that he brought up is that both matter and energy are the same in such a way that there really isn't no matter, is just energy. And I thought that was pretty cool, and it gave me some appreciation of this soul, Einstein, and what he contributed and what he shared. You know, what I felt like was just channeled. In a lot of ways. Distilling it down with energy is like is breaking down everything into vibrations. Whether it's dense and it's concrete, we can perceive it through the senses, or we can't perceive it, and it's intangible through our meta senses or our sixth sense, if you will. What distinguishes the what's concrete and like physical versus what's spiritual, non-tangible, is the level of vibration where it's at. And I'm sure it's at some point there's a threshold perhaps of where it goes from spiritual to, or I'm sure there's a fine line, right? To be able to cross that threshold would be interesting. But I guess that would be, I guess, what you would relate to death when you're talking about, or at least when I talk about death, that would be, I guess, that line of crossing over, looking at it a certain way. And then the third item he talked about was polarity, the third key when it comes to Tantra, the teachings, polarity. And so, he was starting off with the definition of what does it mean? What does polarity mean? And simply put, a couple definitions like having two poles or to be polar. So it's like, and one of the key, and there was another definition where the key components of it that he really wanted to bring home was the opposite powers or properties in opposite parts or directions. And so when it comes to in the context of Tantra, most of the practices, or if not all, are geared towards the masculine and feminine polarity. And he brought up that it's not about, when he mentions masculine and feminine, it's not about man or woman, but it's because he's sharing that, and I recognize this, that everyone has masculine and feminine energies. Another way of looking at it is that we have masculine and feminine qualities. Regardless of how one identifies, everybody embodies the masculine and feminine. That's a reality. That's to me, that's a fact. I can agree with Guy on that. But it's interesting when he talked about the masculine and feminine. What we know with what I've learned in the teachings from the college, if simply to distill it, it goes to the intellectual and feeling nature. The masculine is the intellectual nature. The feminine is the feeling nature. Parts that we all have, regardless of who we are, how we identify, what we believe. We all have two natures. So that was pretty cool. And when he talks about the polarities, it's like they're complementary, they're equal and opposites, and they seek to unify. There's this aspect of unity, and so it's really bringing in this idea of the unification of both. And so I guess when they talk about union in the traditional couple, man and woman, that's part of, I think, where it comes that the understanding there was that correlation is just like the union between two magnetic polarities, they come together, they attract. And then we look at it masculine and feminine, or in this case, a man and a woman, the traditional way, right? Looking at it like the unification, the union. And what we look, I guess that union is, I guess, what I would equate with when we talk about romantic. There's that union, a special kind of union. And that isn't to say I can't experience a union with a friend, but I think it's something distinguished and different. So I did that. I think that's very fascinating. And so the teaching he taught, at least with this part with polarity, the tantric teaching is recognizing the duality and polarity of life and the importance of mastery. And I'll add even further the importance of balance. Because we have two natures, because we live in a world where we look at the mechanics of polarity in our environment, in our own spiritual makeup and everything, that is from that pivot that there's this concept of balance, why there needs to be balance, because otherwise I can go into either polarities, either extremes, right? Looking at society and looking at public discourse and politics, that alone should tell you that being out of balance, where I'm caught in a polarity all in, creates chaos, creates a lot of dis-ease. Looking at it from that perspective, my friend. So I'm looking at example from in the environment to understand life as in general, to understand ourselves as a soul. That's just for me. I just share that so that giving you an example here, playing around with, navigating through this, right, and all these teachings, and just to help understand to help understand the world. And this is why, at this point in time, I think it would be important to say that it's because it's through our experiences we can prove truth to ourselves, and just and from that and observing and even just having the knowledge as well can really put things in perspective. And so now let's revisit breath work. I remember we talked about breath work here, or he talked about breath work. And so why that's important, that's a staple to tantric practices because it embodies and encompasses all the three that I mentioned earlier: the presence, energy, and polarity. And one of the things that I learned about breath work when he was teaching is that, when we breathe slow, when it slows us, because like he mentions about the state, there's the fight or flight and the rest and digest, right? Otherwise known as the sympathetic and parasympathetic states, and so when he was talking about, one of the things that I've learned from that portion of the class is that with my own breath, I can control my nervous system. So if I were to, I remember he had us breathe very fast, like out through our mouth, like think like a dog, right? to to activate our sympathetic system, the fight or flight response. And I remember he asked us to tune in and to observe and notice, and I felt myself full of energy. And then got us to breathe nice and slow for a couple moments, a couple breaths, and then that activated the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest. And then that helped me to relax even more. So we were kind of playing around and shifting around. And he basically gave me the experience of, through breath, how I can shift the fight or flight to rest and digest. And it's so, and to me, now I understand, it helps me to appreciate more of breath work and how I can make it more practical. Especially like, he mentions in the context, as far as practically speaking, for the purpose of grounding, right? I don't know about you, but I can get very stimulated. I can get very overwhelmed with things sometimes. And this could be a perfect tool that I can do within minutes. I mean, he even said it could be achieved under a minute if I find myself feeling off, to come back, because there are things in the environment we are very sensitive to the energies in the environment and other people. That's part of our nature and who we are, what we are as a soul. That's part of the game. And so utilizing the breath work here and what I've learned so far has been like, okay, super powerful because it helps me to really being in control, being more mastery, what he was talking about. The aim of Tantra is self mastery, which is, again, alignment with what I talk about, mastery of energy. At least what I've learned from the college and the tools and stuff that I've learned, it's all about that, the mastery. I think that's the commonality of why we're all here in this school. And so this is just like a perfect tool, a simple tool to be able to just bring ourselves back, to come back home. And I think that right there, breathwork is a powerful tool to build resilience, to build resilience. It's a very powerful tool. And so I was left with that, at least that at this point of the course was just like a new deepened perspective of breathwork. Because I always thought, I remember when it came to breathwork, I always thought it was something that was just, it was actually kind of woo woo at some point. Then at some point, I started to see some value. And then as I'm going through my years, it's like, oh, I found myself coming back to breathwork at certain points in my life. But that's only because the breath, what I've come to learn and understand is that it represents life. Depending on my rate, the pace of my breath really says a lot about my current state. If it's fast, it's heightened, might be some stress, fight or flight. Or if I'm relaxed, if it's more slower, it's more relaxed, more open, especially when it comes to like what I see as value to be relaxed, to be able to receive insights from my guidance, to tune into those intuitive hunches, to discern all that. And so it's amazing to us just at least thus far in this taking this tantra course, how really just all this is teaching me more about just understanding the mechanics of how to live in balance, how to balance my material and spiritual world. But looking at it from the frame of my own physical body, me and my relationship with my physical body, soul me, and then my physical me. And I think it's important. It's part of the loyalty to self, the relationship with the self, the physical body is part of it. The physical body is a church. It's actually, matter of fact, what the Peace Community Church teaches is the second church. Our first church is our state of consciousness or the soul part, the energy part of us. And so that's something that I've been thinking about to try out for this month as a goal, to work with that more. And if I find myself feeling off, to make it that conscious effort to work with my breath to recenter myself. And I remember even today, I felt myself doing that after kind of being in this mode, especially kind of navigating these days of like post winter storm and having to been holed up in my house for the most part and not going out for my work and not going out much, period. It's taken its toll. I know for myself, but definitely like at least today, I feel like I'm more back on track with myself. You could say more regulated, more centered, more back home. And so I'm thinking about that. And I encourage you, my friend, as well, to think about that as you're navigating the month, at least as the time recording this month of February, the breath. I think to me, I want to speak on that just came up. The theme of the month of this month, this current month of February, is immortality. And I see a connection between immortality and the breath because the breath is life. Life, looking at it holistically from a bigger picture perspective, it's eternal. Because as a soul, you and I, we're eternal. We have no beginning or end. We just are. And so I think when I tune back to my breath, it's really helping me to connect and tune back to my eternal being self. And something that I also was putting together that I was sharing with my guides, my helpers with Tantra. When it comes to my attention, one of the key pillars when talking about presence, right? I recognize that my attention, or you could say focus, has to go somewhere. In other words, there's no such thing as focus on nothing. What does that even mean to focus on nothing? That's also trying to say like think nothing. That's impossible. And I think the fact that I can't focus on nothing expands on I can't think nothing. There's no such thing. My mind I have to be focused on something. And to take it a step up spiritually, my energy has to flow somewhere at all times. This helps me to understand more as a soul. I am a directed force of energy. My energy has to go somewhere all the time. It's not just like bleh, kind of can't be fragmented, or it can happen, but fragmented is the out of balance. When I'm directed, that's being in balance. It's moving in balance. And that's what I imagine when I look at a high soul, our spirit guides. They're in that directed vibration 24/7. You might think, oh man, that sounds like, or at least to me, I'm thinking to myself, that sounds like hard work. But really, for them, it's nothing. It's easy because they did the work, though. They had to do the work when they were here on planet Earth at some point. They had to do the work. It didn't just come to them like that overnight. And that's part of our journey and where we are as well, what we're moving towards. It's that mastery to be a master soul, each and every single one of us. And so understanding that my focus has to go towards something. It has to be somewhere, right? I have to direct it. Now I understand the importance of inner leadership, why I need to be in charge of my own energy. I need to, because if I don't direct my energy, the way of the laws and how energy works, the environment will direct it for me. Somebody or something out there in the environment will direct my energy if I don't. And this is what my experiences have taught me. If there's something foreign to you, be open to the experience. And I would hope for you to understand that. That's why everybody needs to be a leader of themselves. Okay, I'm sure that yes, there are certain people that have an aptitude, that have an innateness to be to help lead others. Those are intuitives. In a specific context, I actually mean it a little bit differently, but I won't go into it. I won't elaborate there. But if you know, you know. But at the very least, baseline. Everybody needs to be a leader of themselves. That's part of the whole self mastery. That's part of what's required to live. That's what is required for me to live my own life. I need to be the leader of it. Tip of the spear ahead. And me living my life, going my path, carving my path. And so it's just amazing just taking this course, how it adds on to what I've been putting together for myself and why what I've learned and what the Wayshowers College has taught me is that when I know there's some things foundational and it's a core, and then when I start learning new things and I find myself coming back to the core, the foundations, that's how you know they're universal. Whatever your core beliefs are, your pillars, when your life experiences brings you back to it, you know it's universal. It's a core. And so to give you a sense of my core, just to give you a little perspective and some, to kind of compare apples to apples and to see where they intersect perhaps. Number one, I'm going to use the I pronoun here. I am energy. Number two, I came here to learn and grow. Number three, I have a unique life purpose. Number four, I have inner guidance or help. Number five, I am free. And so I find myself coming back to those pillars or why I consider them pillars because they really gets to the essence of the key aspects of the human experience, or rather the aspects of me, a spiritual being having these human experiences. It really tells me a lot about that. And so this has been an eye-opening thing, and I'm looking forward to taking the rest of this course and see where it takes me. But I just love how it just expands on it, and I know I'm in a good place. And I feel like when I'm in this practice, when you're in this mode, we are building on our foundation. We are strengthening it. And there's always opportunity to strengthen our inner foundation because there will be areas in our lives, there will be life situations will come up where we will be put in a situation where I know for me, I don't feel inner secure. Some that are like new, and there's some that I'm dealing with for a long period of time. And as much as I hate to admit that, I have to be patient and compassionate and reverent with myself because it's part of my process. And if there's anything within yourself that you can identify that you've been wrestling with for a while, give yourself grace. And at the end of the day, we're all going to make it. Based on like your understanding of at least what I've shared to you about Tantra, what are some things you can implement? What are some things that has resonated with you? What would your life look like if you integrated breathwork as a practice on your day to day stuff? What would your day look like? Or how would you feel on a day to day basis? Something for me to think about that I'm going to be moving into this month with. And yeah, very powerful stuff here. And so I'll leave it here, my friend. This has been another episode of Spirit Engineered. I'm your host, Alvin Cepeda, signing out. And as always, take care, my dear friend.